It started at a dinner party when Eric made a joke about me losing track of reality again. Everyone laughed, even my best friend Maya. I forced a smile, but something inside me cracked. The room blurred as their laughter echoed. I gripped my wine glass tghtr, watching Eric's smug grin as he soaked up the attention. That's when I realized I'd become the punchline in my own life. For 3 years, I'd been defending myself against accusations I couldn't see coming. I was always the confused one, the forgetful one, the one who misunderstood. But sitting there, surrounded by people who once respected me, I felt the fog begin to lift. Eric caught my eye across the table and winked, like we were sharing a private joke. We weren't. He was the joke, and I was Donnie being the setup. I excused myself to the bathroom, stared at my reflection, and whispered, "This ends now." I didn't know how yet, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. That night marked the beginning of my investigation into my own husband. When we got home, I asked him why he humiliated me in front of everyone. He sighed deeply, like I was exhausting him. "Laura, you really need to calm down. It was just a joke," he said, loosening his tie. I felt my chest tighten. The same script, every time. I apologized, again, even though I'd done nothing wrong. The words tasted bitter in my mouth, but they came out automatically after years of conditioning. Eric kissed my forehead and told me I was too sensitive before heading upstairs. I stood in the kitchen, hands shaking, wondering when I'd become this person. The woman who apologized for existing. I poured myself water and noticed my reflection in the kitchen window, hollow eyes, defeated posture. I barely recognized myself anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the dinner, analyzing every laugh, every glance. Maya's laugh had seemed hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should join in. Or maybe I was imagining that too. Eric's words echoed in my mind, "You need to calm down." But I was calm. Too calm. Numb, actually. 2 weeks later, I found lipstick on one of his dress shirts, bright red, definitely not mine. My hands trembled as I held it up to the light. Eric walked in and barely glanced at it. "That's fabric dye from the cleaners," he said casually, taking it from me. "You're imagining things again, Laura." I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of guilt. Nothing, just irritation. I threw the shirt in the trash after he left for work, but the image burned into my mind. That night, he hugged me from behind while I did dishes and whispered, "You really should talk to someone. This paranoia isn't healthy." I felt my stomach drop. Was I paranoid? The lipstick had looked real, smelled like perfume. But Eric seemed so certain, so calm. I started questioning my own eyes. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. Maybe I really was losing it. I dried my hands and turned to face him, ready to apologize again, but he'd already walked away, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something the caller said. The isolation started slowly. Eric began, forgetting, to invite me to his company events. I'd find out from mutual friends later, which made the humiliation worse. "Oh, I thought you knew," they'd say awkwardly. Friends stopped calling as much. When I mentioned it to Eric, he shrugged. "You're becoming too negative, Laura." People noticed that. I started believing him. Maybe I was dragging everyone down with my paranoia and sensitivity. I withdrew further, canceling plans, avoiding social situations where I might embarrass myself, or Eric. My world shrank to the 4 walls of our house. I stopped posting on social media. Stopped answering calls. My sister Diane tried reaching out, but I made excuses. What would I even say? That my husband thinks I'm crazy and I'm starting to agree? The loneliness felt like drowning in slow motion. Every day, the water rose a little higher. Eric thrived in my absence, his social calendar full while mine emptied. He'd come home late from dinners and events, smelling like perfume and wine, telling me I'd hate that crowd anyway. One morning, Eric suggested therapy. He even booked the appointment for me, wrote the address on a sticky note. "Dr. Martinez comes highly recommended," he said, squeezing my shoulder. I went, desperate for answers. The therapist, a kind woman in her 50s, listened to me talk for an hour. She said I seemed anxious but fundamentally kind and self-aware. When I told Eric that evening, he laughed, actually laughed. "See? Even she thinks you're unstable," he said, twisting her words completely. I never went back. The thought of returning made my chest tight. What was the point if Eric would just use it against me? I started avoiding mirrors because I didn't recognize the woman staring back. My hair had lost its shine. Dark circles shadowed my eyes. I'd lost weight, not in a good way. My clothes hung loose. Eric noticed but said nothing, just watched me with this calculating expression I couldn't decode. Sometimes I'd catch him staring, and when our eyes met, he'd smile. Not warmly, triumphantly. Eric's phone became a fortress. He started taking calls outside, in his car, in the garage, anywhere I wasn't. He'd whisper urgently, then hang up when I appeared. His phone screen stayed face down always, and he'd changed his passcode from our anniversary to something I didn't know. When I finally asked why all the secrecy, he smiled that patient smile that made me feel small. You'd only misinterpret things, Laura. You know how you get. I stopped asking. What was the point? Every question became evidence of my instability, my jealousy, my paranoia. I watched him carry that phone like it contained government secrets, watched him type messages with a smile I never saw when he looked at me anymore. At night, he'd charge it in the bathroom, door locked. I lay in bed listening to the occasional buzz of notifications, wondering what I'd done to deserve this distance. Or if I'd imagined the closeness we'd once had. Maybe we'd never been close at all. Maybe I'd constructed an entire marriage in my head, built on nothing but wishful thinking and self-deception. Chicago this time, Eric announced, kissing my forehead while I packed his suitcase like I always did. I folded his shirts carefully, added his favorite tie. I'd been a good wife, hadn't I? Supportive, understanding. I even packed extra socks because he always forgot. But after he left, I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. I opened his laptop, he'd left it home, by accident, and checked his company's calendar online. The conference was in Boston, not Chicago. My heart hammered. I stared at the screen, refreshing it twice to make sure. Boston. Definitely Boston. I told myself it was a mix-up, maybe a private client meeting he couldn't discuss. But deep down, something cold settled in my chest. The realization that I'd been lying to myself as much as he'd been lying to me. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence of our empty house, feeling the walls close in. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Just sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at nothing. One evening, I forgot to pick up Eric's dry cleaning. An honest mistake. I'd been battling a migraine all day. He exploded. Called me useless, scatterbrained, ungrateful. The words came fast and sharp, each one landing like a physical blow. I work all day while you sit here doing nothing, and you can't even handle one simple task, he yelled. I cried in the bathroom until 2 in the morning, mascara streaking my face, throat raw from silent sobs. He apologized the next morning with roses, 24 red ones, delivered to the door. I was stressed, he said, pulling me into a hug. You know I didn't mean it. I took the flowers and pretended everything was fine because that's what I always did. I arranged them in a vase, their sweet smell making me nauseous. The card read, "To my perfect wife." I stared at those words for a long time. Perfect. I'd tried so hard to be perfect, and it still wasn't enough. That night, I threw the roses away. Eric never noticed. Eric started locking his home office, a room that used to be open, where I'd bring him coffee while he worked. Now it stayed shut, and he kept the key on his ring. One evening, he forgot to lock it after rushing out for a client emergency. My hands shook as I opened the drawer. Inside, buried under papers, I found a hotel keycard from Denver. He'd never mentioned Denver, not once. I heard his car pulling into the driveway and my heart nearly stopped. I shoved the card back, closed the drawer, and slipped out of the office just as the front door opened. Laura? He called out. I appeared from the kitchen, acting casual, heart thundering so loud I was sure he could hear it. He studied my face for a long moment, eyes narrowing. Were you in my office? He asked Ed quietly. I shook my head. Why would I be? He stared at me for another beat, then smiled. No reason. Just thought I heard something. That night, I lay awake, replaying every second, terrified he'd somehow know. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the blank notebook in front of me. I'd bought it weeks ago but hadn't known what to write. Now I did. I titled it, Truth, in careful handwriting and dated the first page. I wrote down the Denver keycard, the Boston not Chicago trip, the lipstick, the locked office, the guarded phone. Everything. Years of gaslighting, documented in blue ink. Each entry felt like reclaiming a piece of my sanity, proof of that I wasn't imagining things. I decided not to confront Eric, not yet. Confrontation would only lead to more gaslighting, more twisting of reality until I doubted myself again. Instead, I would watch and wait and gather evidence. I would become invisible in my own home, a ghost collecting secrets. That decision changed everything. For the first time in years, I felt something other than confusion and self-doubt. I felt purpose. Cold, clear purpose. I hid the notebook in a box of tampons under the bathroom sink. Eric would never look there. Small victories. The notebook became my lifeline. Every lie went in it. Receipts I found crumpled in his pants pockets. Dates he said he'd be one place but was clearly somewhere else. Words he said that contradicted things he'd told me before. I started printing bank statements when he was out, photographing credit card bills. Each page felt like taking back power. The evidence mounted, hotel charges in cities he'd never mentioned, dinners for two when he claimed to be at business meetings, cash withdrawals he couldn't explain. I documented everything with dates and times, organized it carefully. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. At night, when Eric slept, I'd pull out the notebook and add new entries by phone light. The ritual soothed me, made me feel less crazy. I wasn't losing my mind. I was finding the truth. And the truth, however painful, was better than the fog of constant doubt. My hands steadied. My mind cleared. I started sleeping better, ironically, now that I knew for certain I wasn't imagining things. An email notification pinged on our shared laptop. Eric had forgotten to log out. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. A hotel receipt from Phoenix, auto-forwarded from his work account. The guest listed, Eric Benton +1. My hands went numb. Place S1. Not a solo business trip. I sat frozen, staring at the screen until the words blurred. Then I forwarded the email to my personal account and carefully deleted all traces of what I'd done. My fingers worked on autopilot, my mind spinning. He wasn't just lying. He was living an entirely separate life. A life with another woman, in cities I'd never visited, creating memories I wasn't part of. I closed the laptop gently, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, a neighbor watered her garden, completely oblivious to the fact that my world had just collapsed for the 100th time. Except this time, I didn't collapse with it. This time, I felt something different. Not heartbreak, clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I added the Phoenix receipt to the notebook. The evidence was becoming undeniable. I started smiling again. Not genuine smiles, careful, measured ones that said, I'm fine. Everything's normal. Eric noticed the change and relaxed. He thought my silence meant submission, that I'd finally accepted my role as the confused, forgetful wife who needed his patience. He started gloating more openly, making jokes about my episodes to friends on speakerphone while I cooked dinner. I said nothing, just kept cooking, kept smiling, kept documenting. I wasn't angry anymore, I was observant. Every detail he let slip, I filed away. Every inconsistency, every forgotten lie, I noted. Eric had no idea he was being studied, that the woman he'd spent years breaking down was quietly rebuilding herself into someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who wouldn't break this time. I watched him the way a scientist watches a specimen, dispassionately, clinically. He'd made me doubt my own mind for years. Now I was returning the favor, letting him think he'd won while I built my case brick by brick. The irony wasn't lost on me. At a charity event, a coworker's wife named Vanessa cornered me by the dessert table. She looked deeply uncomfortable, shifting her weight. Laura, she said quietly, glancing around. Do you know Eric's been seen with someone from his office? At restaurants, hotels. She watched my face, clearly expecting tears. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me, I said calmly. Her eyes widened. You already knew? I didn't answer directly. Can you tell me her name? I asked. Vanessa hesitated, then whispered, Natalie. Natalie Simmons. She's in his department. I committed the name to memory, added it to my mental file. That night, I searched Natalie Simmons online. Young, pretty, blonde. Her social media showed a woman who traveled frequently, posted photos from hotels and restaurants. Some of the locations matched Eric's business trips. I took screenshots of everything. The notebook was getting full. I'd need another one soon. The evidence was overwhelming now, undeniable even to someone who'd spent years doubting herself. Eric called from the airport, furious that I wasn't there to pick him up. "Where are you?" he demanded. I calmly reminded him his ticket said he'd arrive the next day. I'd checked his email confirmation that morning. Silence stretched across the line. For he first time in our marriage, I heard something new in his voice, fear. "I must have gotten the days confused," he finally said. "I'll take a cab." He hung up quickly. I stared at my phone, replaying that moment of panic in his voice. He'd slipped. Mad EA mistake. And he knew I'd caught it. That evening, when he came home, he watched me differently, warily, like I was a stranger. "Everything okay?" I asked sweetly, pouring him wine. "Fine," he said, but he didn't look fine. He looked rattled. Good. Let him feel what I'd felt for years. That unsettling sense that the ground beneath you isn't solid, that reality might shift at any moment. I smiled and went back to cooking dinner, humming quietly. Behind me, I could feel his eyes boring into my back. Eric left for another business trip on a Tuesday morning. I kissed him goodbye and watched his car disappear down the street. Then I went straight to his office. The door was unlocked. He'd been in a hurry. On his desk, barely hidden, was an envelope containing hotel confirmation for Denver, booked under E. Benson. A slight misspelling, probably intentional for privacy. The woman listed as co-traveler, Natalie Simmons. There it was. Confirmation of everything I'd suspected. I took photos from multiple angles, making sure the dates and names were clear. My hands didn't shake anymore. I felt oddly calm, like I'd been preparing for this moment for years without knowing it. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and closed the office door. My proof was complete now. Everything documented, photographed, timestamped. I had built an airtight case against my own husband. That night, I cooked myself a nice dinner, something I enjoyed, not something Eric liked. I poured a glass of wine and toasted to myself. To the truth, I whispered. I was folding laundry on a Wednesday afternoon when the breaking news alert flashed across the TV. Private business jet crashes near Denver. Multiple casualties. My hands stilled on the shirt I was holding. They listed the passengers slowly, formally. Eric Benton, age 38. The room went silent except for the droning news anchor. The laundry basket slipped from my hands, clothes scattering across the floor. I stood frozen, staring at the screen showing wreckage scattered across a field. Emergency vehicles. Smoke. Eric's company photo appeared on screen, the one from his LinkedIn, where he smiled confidently at the camera. I sank onto the couch, not breathing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. They'd gotten the name wrong. Eric was supposed to be in Denver for meetings, yes, but not on a private jet. That made no sense. Unless that was another lie. The phone started ringing. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Just sat there as my world tilted sideways and everything I'd known, or thought I'd known, shattered into pieces. The news continued, showing footage of the crash site. Then another photo appeared, a young woman, smiling in her company ID. Also among the victims, Natalie Simmons, age 29. My knees gave out. I slid from the couch to the floor, hand pressed against my mouth. The affair wasn't just confirmed, it had ended in flames on a mountainside in Denver. They'd been together, on a private jet, going somewhere they'd never return from. The phone rang constantly. Family, friends, Eric's boss. I couldn't answer, couldn't form words. My mind kept cycling through the notebook entries, all those documented lies now ending in this impossible tragedy. I'd spent months gathering evidence for a confrontation that would never happen, building a case for a divorce that had become unnecessary in the worst possible way. Hours passed. The sun set. I sat in darkness, surrounded by scattered laundry and ringing phones, trying to process that Eric was gone. Not just gone from our marriage, but gone completely. And the truth had died with him. Eric's employer called the next morning. "Mrs. Benton, we're so sorry for your loss. We need to ask, did you know about his unreported trips?" The question hung in the air. I took a breath. "I have records," I said quietly. Long silence on the other end. "Could you come to the office? We'd like to discuss this." I brought the notebook, walked into that glass-walled boardroom like I was testifying at trial. Laid the evidence across the conference table, receipts, photos, bank statements, hotel confirmations. Everything. The executives' faces went from sympathetic to horrified as they flipped through pages. "How long did you know?" one asked. "Months," I said. "I was gathering evidence for divorce." The air in the room turned to ice. They exchanged glances, silent conversations happening without words. "Mrs. Benton," the CEO said. "Carefully, we'll need to investigate this further. There may be irregularities beyond the personal matter." I nodded. I'd done my part. Shown them the truth. Whatever they found from here was their problem, not mine. I left feeling lighter somehow, despite everything. The investigation moved fast. Within days, investigators uncovered falsified expense reports, stolen company funds, and an affair that had lasted 5 years, not the months I'd documented, but years. Eric had been siphoning money, hiding it in accounts under variations of his name. The trips weren't just affairs, they were elaborate schemes to move money and cover his tracks. His name hit the news again, this time tied to fraud and embezzlement. I watched the coverage in silence, sitting in my living room as reporters dissected the man I'd married. "Benton led a double life," one anchor said. "His wife had no idea. But I had known. Maybe not everything, not the full scope, but I'd known something was wrong. I'd documented it, proved it. The media painted me as the naive, betrayed wife. I didn't correct them, let them think what they wanted. I knew the truth. I'd been the only one paying attention while everyone else laughed at his jokes and believed his lies. Vindication felt hollow when the person you were right about was dead. Neighbors came by with casseroles and pitying looks. "Poor Laura," they whispered. "First the affair, now this." They offered condolences I didn't want for a marriage that had died long before. Eric's plane went down. I accepted their food with polite thanks and threw most of it away. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus. I wasn't mourning Eric. I was grieving the 3 years I'd wasted believing I was crazy, the version of myself I'd lost in his maze of lies. Some nights I'd pull out the notebook and read through entries, trying to remember the woman who'd written them. The one who'd been so systematically broken down she'd doubted her own eyes. I was angry at him, yes, but angrier at myself for not leaving sooner, for not trusting my instincts. For apologizing when I'd done nothing wrong. For folding his shirts and packing his suitcases while he flew off to another life. The grief wasn't for Eric. It was for me, for all the time I'd never get back. A week later, a lawyer's letter arrived. Insurance payout. Everything in Eric's name, the house, accounts, cars, investments, passed to me as his spouse. I stared at the numbers, astronomical amounts I'd never seen before. Blood money, in a way. Payment for years of gaslighting and lies, for being made to feel crazy in my own home. I sat with that letter for hours, feeling nothing. Then something. Not joy, relief. I didn't owe Eric my grief. Didn't owe him forgiveness or understanding or retroactive love. He'd made his choices, and they'd ended on a mountainside with his mistress beside him. I'd made my choices too. To document, to survive, to trust myself. Even when no one else did. The money didn't fix anything, but it gave me options. Freedom. The ability to start over without looking back. That night, I finally slept through without nightmares. The house felt less suffocating. I could breathe again. Small steps toward a life that was actually mine. I sold the house within a month. Every room felt haunted, not by Eric's ghost, but by memories of who I'd been here. The woman who apologized for breathing, who checked and rechecked herself constantly, who'd become small and quiet and afraid. I couldn't yell in those walls. With the money, I opened a small bookkeeping business from a modest office downtown. Just me, a desk, and peace. No one questioning my sanity. No one twisting my words. I hung a framed quote above my desk. Clarity is power. It became my mission statement. I helped small business owners organize their finances, find discrepancies, build systems they could trust. Work that felt meaningful, where numbers didn't lie and truth was quantifiable. Clients recommended me to others. The business grew slowly, steadily. I hired an assistant, a young woman escaping her own bad marriage. I recognized that look in her eyes, the constant second-guessing. "You're not crazy," I told her. "Trust yourself." She cried. I understood. Sometimes being believed is all we need to start believing in ourselves again. 6 months after the crash, I received an email from Eric's sister Amanda. "Laura, you were right all along about my brother. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I laughed at that dinner party. You deserved better." I read it 3 times, then cried for the first time in months. Not sad tears, something else. Relief, maybe. Validation. Someone from his family finally acknowledged what he'd done, how he'd treated me. I wrote back a simple, "Thank you," and closed my laptop. I didn't need her apology, but receiving it felt like the final piece clicking into place. I wasn't the villain in this story, wasn't the crazy wife who couldn't handle a joke. I'd been right. My instincts had been right. The fog he'd created had been deliberate, calculated. And I'd found my way out. That evening, I updated my business website. Added a section about my journey, vaguely worded but honest. Within days, I received emails from women asking for help, not just with bookkeeping, but with documenting irregularities in their own lives. I'd accidentally created something bigger than a business. It's been 2 years now. I volunteer at a women's center on weekends, helping others find their footing after leaving bad situations. I teach basic financial literacy, how to open separate accounts, document expenses, protect yourself. When people ask about my past, I keep it simple. My husband once told me I couldn't see things clearly. Turns out, I was the only one who could. The notebook sits in my office drawer now, a reminder of what I survived. Sometimes new clients notice it and ask what it is. Proof, I tell them. That trusting yourself matters more than keeping peace. I'm not the same person I was at that dinner party 3 years ago. I don't apologize for existing. Don't question my own memory. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. Eric's death didn't free me, my decision to document the truth did. The crash just finalized what I'd already decided, that I deserved better, deserved to be believed, deserved to trust my own mind. Some might call this a tragic ending. I call it vindication, not vengeance. I never wanted that. Just validation that I wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining things. The truth didn't need Eric's confession. It existed with or without him. And that truth set me free.